speaker starts that way, but for me, it really is. This is my passion. I'm a emeritus professor, which has one incredible privilege, and that is I get a parking permit that can be used anywhere on Boise State's campus. It's fantastic. Other than that, I'm now free to really do whatever I want in my life for what's left. And that's, for a lot of people, actually pretty frightening. They think they're going to go and play golf and fish, and those are fantastic activities when you intersperse it with work. But if that's all you do, time quickly you start looking for something else. So I can pick and choose what I do, and I choose to keep working with the Executive MBA program at Boise State, which is I think a very exciting program. Jason's one of our very first graduates. Yeah, and I think the program can stand and fall by Jason. I had to pause a minute to be sure of that. But we teach from a very active-oriented approach. We have lots of projects. And we teach innovation by immersing our students into a startup process, not, I think, dissimilar to what you're doing. So in about a 10-week process, they go from not having a clue what they're going to do, coming up with some ideas. Now we go through a fairly systematic process where they really study the user and create a map of the user's world and try and really become anthropologists. And then they work out what job does this user really want doing. And they're trying to find a 5x, 10x job, something that makes a tremendous difference to that person's life where they don't really have a good alternative. And then they move on and they develop a business plan, and we bring in some angel investors. Kevin's done this a few times, and they kind of vote up or down. And one thing I learned is that there's no telling which way they're going to vote. There's very little inter-rater reliability, we would say. It's not easy. Most people get it wrong on both sides of the guest when you're looking at a very early stage business. And we know there's a reason for that, that almost no business plan survives first contact with customers. And they have to, the buzzword is today, they have to pivot and change rapidly. So I've become very interested in that process, and from being a member of the Boise Angel Alliance, which is kind of an umbrella organization for angel investors in Boise. There's a couple of funds, and we kind of fund early stage businesses, not businesses that are just conceptual, ones hopefully that have some customers and some early traction, but have a lot of promise. So if we put money into it and time and effort and diligence and support, we hope that that can really scale rapidly and become one of the very few but very important rapid-fire growth businesses. So that's what I've been doing and why I'm interested in what you guys are doing. And one of the things, I'm really a bit of a fraud here because I'm not a real entrepreneur. I've been involved in startups as an investor, but I'm an academic, I'm an educator. And that brings some similarities to entrepreneurs. We both have very short attention spans, I find. And I can keep going from topic to topic, and they can keep going from business to business. But I'm not as action-oriented as a Jason or a Steve Hodges. Kevin's a weird hybrid. I'm not sure which camp he falls. But real entrepreneurs are action-oriented. They like to wear out shoe leather and get out there and try something. And they're the kind of people I love to watch and study and understand how they do it. And from people like me who've been researching entrepreneurs, we've made a fantastic discovery. And that is what we've been teaching for 100 years in business school. Is not only doesn't fit, is inappropriate for a startup. That a startup is not a small, big company. And risk is managed in a totally different way. But the problem is angel investors have copied pretty much the venture capital model. And the venture capital model is based on business plans. It's based on MBA type thinking. And a lot of them are extremely good at least in terms of being able to analyze and talk about a business plan. In terms of their record, not very good. Venture capitalists are really not the people you want to be copying if you're looking at their record. Recent research has shown very low return on invested capital and very poor probability of the guesses they make. Only 11% of the firms that are funded by venture capitalists actually are bought and acquired by another firm. And yet we routinely, as angel investors, think that every investment we're going to make has a good chance of being bought out by somebody someday. But the real problem is that big firms manage risk in an entirely different way from little firms, or should do. Big firms manage risk by trying to do what they already know a lot about and trying to replicate a proven business model. And therefore, if you're pitching for money in a large company like Simplot or HP, you're pitching for something in a known area, typically, something where you've got data that you can really back up your pitch in terms of what customers want, the proven increments usually that they're looking for, and the return on investment that you can promise. And big companies are trying to move large amounts of money to get reasonable, risk-adjusted return on investment. Now, small companies don't have a business model, typically. They're in search of one. Small companies have a ratio of about 95% unknown to known. So you cannot manage risk by just trying to do a great business plan. That simply doesn't work. And in fact, we'll get to how you manage risk and how really good entrepreneurs have always managed risk in a little bit. But before I get to that, I want to talk about the mind, because we know a lot more about how the mind works. And in the early stage of a business, think about it, that's your main tool. That's what you're working with. You're working with your minds. And our minds are wonderful instruments, but they didn't evolve for this task. They evolved to escape predators and to capture prey on the Sahara in Africa. So I want to give you a little puzzle first. And I want you to think about who this person is, Linda. And I'll read this out. Linda is 31 years old. She's single, outspoken, and very bright. She majored in philosophy. As a student, she was deeply concerned with issues of discrimination and social justice, and also participated in anti-nuclear demonstrations, because that's who Linda is. Now, I want you to think, which is more probable? A, Linda is a bank teller. B, Linda is a bank teller and active in the feminist movement. Now, which came to mind first? B. Okay. Now, that is your system one, as we call it, working. We have two cognitive systems. The first system is extremely fast. It's so fast, it's effortless. We really don't think when we use our system one cognition. And it's the dominant one that we have. It's what we use for recognition. You know, you can go out of this building, you could probably recognize me a couple of days later in this high street and say, hi, you were the guy who was talking the other day about Linda, right? And I said, yeah. And then, how did you recognize me? Well, you wouldn't be able to tell me. You know, we've all got eyebrows, noses, mouths. My hair color's a little different from most of yours. But you would be sure that you could recognize me, but you couldn't tell me how. That's your system one at work. That's flash pattern recognition is what that is. It's associative memory. And our brains are largely wired in that direction to do quick, flash, intuitive judgments. And by and large, they're good. We wouldn't survive if they weren't largely good. But it can mislead us. Now think about this slowly for a minute. It would be impossible for Linda to be a bank teller, right? And to be in these options, A is far more probable than B, isn't it? Because if she is a bank teller and a feminist, she is by definition in the first category, right? She's a bank teller. Now you all know that. You slow down, you look at that, you say, no, that's true. But I've still got this image of Linda in my mind, and bank teller doesn't fit. So what do? We had this prototype, this image that we had of Linda. And it didn't have anything to do with being a bank teller. It had to do with being a philosophy major, being active in social issues, and demonstrating.